We will get a better idea today what Wednesday's presidential inauguration will look like. There's a rehearsal set for this afternoon. But these images show it'll be a stripped-down ceremony with strictly limited attendance, both because of the pandemic and the threat of violence from pro-Trump extremists. The ceremony will happen on the West Front lawn of the Capitol building, West Front there, and Joe Biden will give the traditional inaugural address. Former presidents Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton will all be there. But the crowd will be about the size for a State of the Union address, so just a few hundred instead of the hundreds of thousands who usually fill the National Mall and line Washington streets every 4 years. Landmarks in the U.S. Capitol are now behind tall security fences, unscalable, topped with razor wire. Pennsylvania Avenue closed to the public. There will be no presidential parade, no parties, no inaugural balls, and there are thousands of National Guard troops who are moving in ranks through the city, the only processions on view. 25,000 of those National Guard soldiers in the U.S. Capitol. It's something to talk about with Tracy Walder this morning, a former CIA counterterrorism agent, former FBI special agent, and now a professor of criminal justice at Texas Christian University. She's in Fort Worth, Texas this morning. Welcome to our program.
Thank you for having me.
Let's go back to those pictures, which I'm sure you have seen. Up to 25,000 of these National Guard soldiers now in Washington. And as you see those images, Tracy, what do you see, given your experience, what do you see that my or someone else's less expert eyes are missing there?
So what I see is very much a fortified city. This is something that we've never seen before. This is a perimeter that I don't think people realize just goes far beyond the National Mall. I think, we're seeing a lot of fencing. We're seeing a lot of troops. We're seeing a lot of armored vehicles really around the perimeter of the mall. But I don't think what people realize is almost the entirety of the District of Columbia out into Northern Virginia and Southern Maryland also falls within that perimeter. I think also what we're not seeing too is yesterday evening, a report came out that the FBI now is looking at vetting all 25,000 of the troops that are out there. And the military commanders have also been asked to look for unusual or specific suspicious behavior within their ranks. Really, this is a signal that the military, the FBI, intelligence gathering organizations are looking at threats from within the ranks rather than threats from outside of the ranks.
And if we could talk a little bit more about your assessment of that. I was going to ask you about that. We know that there were current and retired members, both of the military and from law enforcement forces, who were involved in the January the 6th siege. So now that the FBI is vetting, as you say, all 25,000 of the National Guard soldiers, what does that indicate in terms of how widespread they might think this risk or this threat from within is?
So what that tells me is that in a good way, it sounds like they've actually narrowed their focus in regards to what they think this threat is and where they believe that it might be coming from. Just what you said, based on the folks who have since been detained since the insurrection of January 6th. Many of them have been some active duty, actually, military officers, some active duty police officers, and those types of things. And so what that tells me in a good way is that they are sort of thinking outside the box, and they realize that the threat is not from the outside, but from the inside. However, I believe that just based on my experience, that vetting process is going to be incredibly difficult. From a tactical perspective, it's very easy. Not easy, that's probably not the right word. It's very straightforward in terms of how to secure a city. However, how do you look for this type of behavior within your ranks? And a lot of that is really going to come down to vetting social media, vetting digital trails, which is much harder than sort of that face-to-face. And I think is going to take quite a Herculean effort on the part of the FBI and some other intelligence gathering organizations.
Mentioning growing intel and online chatter. I'm wondering what you think of the word we have this morning that Parlor is back online. It was booted off Amazon. Parlor is a place where a lot of far right, a lot of extremist groups communicate and live, and now it's back on being hosted by something called Epic. But the fact that it has returned, what do you make of that?
I'm not surprised necessarily that Parlor has sort of made a resurgence. I figured it would be back up online. However, I do think my larger concern is actually not necessarily with Parlor, strangely. I think the secret's out, right, with Parlor. I think folks who are looking to conduct terroristic type activities are probably going to actually move off of Parlor now because they know that Parlor is being monitored. And in fact, we had something called a white hat hacker, or a hacker who is hacking for positive means, go in and archive all of the geodata from Parlor. And so I think they are moving to sites like 4chan, perhaps sites on the dark web that we just simply don't know about, and that are really difficult to track. So, Parlor's back up. It's easier to track now that it's back up. However, I do think that some of them are moving to sites that are incredibly difficult to track that we don't necessarily know about.
As they go dark. I'm wondering if that idea, in keeping with what we had anticipated on Sunday, there had been a lot of online chatter about marches on state capitals, for example, and there were certainly numbers of Boogaloo Boys, notably, who showed up in a number of states. But it wasn't the mass mobilization that had been signaled online for yesterday. And I'm wondering whether you have any thought on whether that changes the threat level for Wednesday. It was not as dangerous as had been announced, signaled, and feared.
So I think that the intelligence that we had regarding the 17th of January, that was something that was out. I saw the Oath Keepers talking about the Boogaloo Boys that you mentioned, discussing that Proud Boys. I think the good news is that was sort of older intel. In the intel world, really, if it's an hour old, it's sort of already old. And that information had sort of come to light in the days just following the January 6th insurrection. And so as a result, and rightly so, we really clamped down on security around really everywhere. And I think, in hindsight, folks may think that is, I guess, overkill, and to simplify that. However, in my opinion, it's better to be safe than sorry. Probably the threats were maybe to just a few capitals, but a decision was made to sort of lock down all of the capitals because we really don't want a resurgence of what happened on the 6th. And it's probably better at this point to over prepare rather than under prepare, given the information we know now.
So the arrests that we've seen thus far and the robust investigation that continues, in your view, has it been a deterrent then?
I do believe that these types of things have been a deterrent. I anticipate that folks in these white supremacist groups, in these domestic terrorism groups, perhaps didn't really realize the strength at which the U.S. would sort of come back at them with. I'm not sure why that didn't occur to them, but sometimes they don't plan that far ahead, which I guess is good for us in the intel and law enforcement world. However, I don't know that they anticipated this strong of a response. But, just a few days ago, we had someone try to breach the perimeter sort of around the National Mall with journalist credentials. And it looks like that was an actual inaugural pass that he had. And so, I suspect more of this, more sort of individual type of things, but maybe less in terms of these large crowds that we saw on January 6th.
A pass and 500 rounds of ammunition, so it was a big threat indeed. How confident are you at this point that Wednesday, that the inauguration will be safe?
I'll be very direct when I'm answering that question. I know that people want me to say that, it would be incredibly safe. I'm not going to say that. I think the law enforcement officer in me, the intelligence officer in me, I am always planning in my head for sort of what the worst possible gaming scenario could be. I can't say that I'm fully confident that it will be safe. For example, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I'm not letting her watch it real time. I'll let her watch it later. I just think that that's the responsible thing to do. Right now, I want it to be safe. I want it to be secure. And I really do think that our federal government is doing everything possible to ensure that. However, I cannot say with a level of certainty that everything will be fine. We didn't expect January 6th, what happened there, and so I think we really need to plan for what could happen.
I'm going to pause and leave it at that. And of course, as you say, everyone else hoping the same thing. But ... We will see. Thank you so much, Tracy Walder. I really appreciate your insight in all of this from Fort Worth, Texas this morning, former CIA and former FBI agent, and now a professor at Texas Christian University. Thank you.